Alright, so I've been posting onto this channel now for about 7 years or so, and in that time, one of the questions that people keep asking me is, Oscar, how do you take a pen and spin it around your fingers just like this? So in this video, you're going to be learning 3 really visual and impressive ways to spin a pen around your fingers, and these are just perfect for doing when you're bored at school or you're at the office. Now, I can do a whole variety of different kind of pen spins, but for this video, I've got 3 of the easiest ones that I know, and I'm just going to break them down for you step by step. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to teach you how to learn these moves as fast as possible so you can get them down in a matter of minutes, not in weeks or even months. So it's really important that you stay until the end of the video so you can actually learn this stuff quickly. So with that being said, let's get learning. So the first thing we're going to learn is known as the charge. The charge is a fundamental move in pen spinning that looks like this. As you can see, the pen doesn't actually go anywhere, it just rotates between the same 2 fingers. Now, you will struggle to do this move if you've got a very short pen, so go and find the longest pen you have or use an actual pen spinning pen and then come back to this tutorial. So essentially the charge is actually very similar to just doing this. If you can do this, then you can do the charge. The only difference is the charge has a lot more rotation on the move itself. So let's break this down. So there are 3 key steps to being able to do the charge. The first is getting the pen in the right hand position. So the easiest way to do this is find the center of gravity on your pen. So just let it rest on your finger and find the balance point. Remember where that point is and then place it in between your middle finger and your ring finger. Now, you don't want to clamp down on the pen too hard. Make sure it doesn't fall out, but if you wiggle your hand, just make sure that the pen can one edge and place it between the flap of skin on your thumb and first finger, between your thumb and first finger. So you're in this position here, and this is your starting position for the charge. So the second step is to curl your fingers in a little bit more from where they are. So your fingers are here, and just curl your ring finger and middle finger in, and that allows you to go on to the third step, which is going to be to open up your hand. So what's going to happen is you're going to open up your hand like this, extending your ring finger and middle finger, and this is going to cause the pen to fly out of this position and rotate in a circular motion. So just practice this and see what happens. What you're aiming for is this, so for the pen to make one full rotation round and landing back here. Now what might happen is you're going to flick the pen out and it might just stop at this point here. If this is happening to you, the way in which you get around this is the pen flicks out, and as soon as it's in this position here, you need to make sure that your middle finger moves backwards. So in slow motion, you flick the pen out, you extend these fingers, and then when the pen gets here, your middle finger moves backwards like this, and that allows the pen to keep rotating round back into this position. So your middle finger moves backwards. Notice where my finger lands. This finger is behind this finger. So your middle finger ends up behind your ring finger, and that allows you to do one complete rotation of the pen. So keep practicing this, making one singular rotation, and then once you've mastered this, get ready to move on to the next part of the tutorial. So now what we need to do is go from singular rotations to a constant rotation like this. So let's break this down. So what's actually happening is, as on a normal singular rotation, the pen finishes here. However, what you want to do now is just before the pen gets to the point where it's going to land between your first finger and thumb, you're going to make sure that your middle finger is going to move forward and your ring finger is going to move back. So let's just do this in slow motion. So you do a normal rotation like this. As we mentioned before, your middle finger then goes back, and that allows the pen to spin around like this. When you're at this point here, instead of the pen landing in here, you're then going to bring your middle finger forward again and your ring finger backwards again. And this forces the pen, as you can see, to do another loop. And then you get to this position and your middle finger goes back and your ring finger goes forward. You get to here and then you bring your middle finger forward again and your ring finger back. So that's all you're doing in slow motion. You're just constantly moving your middle finger and ring finger back and forward. Now, whilst I've just explained the mechanics behind how the charge works, The problem is all of this movement happens so quickly. You can see my middle finger's moving back and forward very rapidly, probably at the same pace as if I was doing this. So the problem is that if you keep thinking forward then back, then back, then forward, your brain isn't going to be able to keep up with the actual movement of the pen itself, and therefore you won't actually get this move down. So now that you understand how the charge actually works, the way in which I'd actually practice it is by holding the pen like this and just doing one rotation. And now what you want to do is try and do 2 rotations. And just try and do that. Try and do 1 rotation and then another one. And then this is how I learnt it. And then you try and go for 3, then 4. And very soon, once you can do 3 rotations, you can just keep that movement and you'll be able to do the charge indefinitely. So 2 things to note. Firstly, as I said earlier, all you're really doing is this, but with more rotation. So don't be put off by this move. It is a bit of muscle memory and it is a bit knacky, but anyone can do this so long as you've got a long pen. Secondly, once you can do it between these 2 fingers, you can then take exactly the same techniques that I've taught you and do it between your first finger and middle finger. But once you can already do it here, doing it between these 2 fingers will be really easy because you already know what the move feels like. The next move we're going to learn is how to do the Sonic. So let's get to the table and master this move. So the Sonic is another fundamental in pen spinning, and it's actually pretty easy to do. I've taught lots of my friends this move and they've been able to master it very, very quickly. And you can also do it with any size pen, it doesn't really matter. So it's quite a versatile move that I definitely recommend learning. Now it is worth knowing this charge before you learn this move, only because the starting position is very similar. So this is the charge and this is the Sonic. However, you don't need to know the charge in order to do this. So if you want to learn this just by itself, then that's absolutely fine. So there are 2 steps to learning the Sonic. The first is getting your starting position right, and the second is the actual flick. So your starting position is basically the same as if you were doing a charge. But just to recap, what you want to do is find the center of gravity in your pen. So with this one, it's bang in the middle. And the way you do that is just rest the pen on your finger. Then place the center of gravity between your ring finger and your middle finger, like that. Then what you want to do is let the tip of the pen rest on the flap of skin between your first finger and thumb. And then the final thing you want to do is make sure that your first finger is placed out like this. And that's just so when you do the move, you can easily catch it between your first finger and middle finger. Now, just to emphasize how important hand movement is if I put my hand in the correct position and I'll flick the pen in just a second and I won't do anything, I'll just let the pen do its thing, you'll notice that the pen basically does everything for me and you don't need to do anything. So it's really worth making sure that you get the right hand position, and if you do that, you'll be 90% of the way to learning this move. Step 2 is the actual flick. Now the way in which you do this is you use your middle finger and you press down on the pen. And what this will do is build pressure behind this flap of skin here. Whenever you want, you can then just release the pen and you'll notice that it flicks around your hand. Once the pen is coming up into its final position, you just want to use your first finger to clamp down and catch it. So that's all there really is to this move. As I said earlier, as soon as you get the right hand positioning, you just need to practice getting the right amount of pressure onto the pen. So just practice pressing it very hard, very softly, and you'll very soon learn the correct amount of pressure to make this spin work every time. One thing to note is that the middle finger always stays still and in exactly the same place. It's not moving up and down. So watch my middle finger as I do it. It basically stays in the same position. So just make a conscious effort to do that and you'll be able to get this pen spinning move down very quickly. Here are 2 common mistakes that people often make when doing the Sonic. The first is the pen just happens to do this and it just gets stuck between your middle finger and ring finger. And this is usually because you're not putting enough pressure on your thumb when doing the move, and it means the pen never is actually able to leave the gap between these 2 fingers. So what you need to do is press down harder with your middle finger and build up more tension between your thumb and first finger. And this will allow you to really flick the pen out at speed and it will be able to push it around your fingers. The second problem I see is the pen coming out like this and then it flips over your middle finger and just falls on the floor. So your first finger isn't able to catch it. And there are two ways to prevent this. The first is you don't want the pen right on your fingertips here, otherwise when it goes over your middle finger, your first finger simply can't grab it. So you want your pen actually closer into your first knuckle here. So here's the hand position. The pen isn't here on your fingertips, it's actually further in. The second way to prevent this is you don't want your first finger right up like that. Instead, you want it slightly more at an angle so that you're able to very quickly just clamp down and catch the pen when it comes over. Finally, we're going to be learning how to do the twisted sonic. So the twisted sonic is a very beautiful spin that's actually much easier to learn than it looks. I've taught loads of my friends this back when I was in school and they were able to learn it whilst in lessons. So if you've got this video tutorial, you'll be able to learn it in no time as well. So the twisted sonic looks like this, and as you can see, the pen moves from being between your ring finger and middle finger to being between your middle finger and first finger, and it makes 1.5 rotations. So you need to know how to do the charge to do this trick, so go and check out my tutorial on the charge. The twisted sonic is a move you can do with any pen, but again, I'd recommend you use a longer pen spinning pen over something shorter like a Sharpie, because it'll just be easier to learn. So there are two steps to doing the twisted sonic. Step one is just doing a charge, and then step two is catching the charge for a bit of extra rotation. So let's break this down. So step one, just do a charge as normal. So that's your middle finger and ring finger on the center of gravity on the pen, and then the tip of the pen just resting here. And now from here, just practice doing a charge. Now, step two is actually quite simple. Instead of just letting the charge flow like this, you're going to get your first finger involved. So as the pen comes round like that, as it's coming down, your first finger comes under the pen and catches it like that. So there'll be a brief moment in time where all three fingers are on the pen. So just practice doing that, getting your first finger under the pen. And you can see that you're starting to get what looks like the twisted sonic. A quick trick is if you're struggling to get your first finger under the pen, just begin with it tucked in here and then do a charge, and then your first finger will naturally come up and get into the correct position for doing the twisted sonic. So you can start off by doing this, and once you're able to do it, you can then move into just doing the twisted sonic normally. Now the final thing is, once you've done this, you just want to make sure you get enough rotation on this bit here. The easiest way to do this is just learn how to do a charge between your middle finger and first finger, and that's essentially all you're doing. So just to recap, you begin by doing a charge, you let the pen rotate around your fingers like this, and then your index finger comes underneath the pen, clamps it so there's all three fingers are on the pen like that, and then the pen will keep rotating round and it will land between your thumb and first finger. So that's all there really is to this move. If you know how to do a charge, this will be very simple, but it still requires you to keep putting the practice in order to get the muscle memory to get this consistent every time. Alright guys, so you've made it to the most important part of the video, which is going to be me explaining how to learn these moves as fast as possible. Because if you're like most people, you've probably tried learning some of the moves that I just taught you, and you've found them pretty tough. You've probably dropped the pen 1,000 times, and the technique itself might be quite challenging. And if that's you, then don't worry, that is completely normal. However, I'm going to give you 2 tips on how to improve your pen spinning so you can learn these moves much faster. So tip number 1 is you've got to use the right sized pen. Now, unfortunately, as with everything in life, size matters, and there's absolutely no difference when it comes to pen spinning. Therefore, you need to use the longest pen you can possibly find when learning these pen spinning moves. So, go and raid your pencil case or your drawers, and just look for a really long pen or pencil that you can use for this pen spinning. A really common mistake I see people making is they use these really tiny little short pens, and this just makes learning all these moves an absolute nightmare. Don't use anything shorter than a Sharpie, and if you are feeling fancy, you can actually buy dedicated pen spinning pens like this. I just got this off Amazon, it's really cheap and they're perfectly weighted. Now these things aren't necessary, but it will make learning these moves like 100 times faster just because this is what these pens are actually for. But you don't need them, you can just use a long pen or pencil. That's how I learnt, but if you want to learn these moves even faster, then go and get yourself an actual pen spinning pen. So tip number 2 is knowing how to practice. So a really common question that I get asked is, like, what did you actually do, Oscar, to learn these pen spinning moves? Like, what was your day-by-day routine to go from having never spun a pen in your life to being able to do all this crazy stuff? So my answer is pretty simple. Instead of spending an hour or 2 hours trying to learn one move all at once, it's much more effective to break your sessions down into smaller chunks. And the reason for this is you learn pen spinning through muscle memory, which takes time to develop. So it's much more effective to spend 20 to 30 minutes a day practicing 4 or 5 days a week than to spend 4 hours practicing these moves in just one big hit. So that's how I learned. What I would do, I would spend 20 to 30 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week, just practicing one of these moves. And then by the end of the week, I'd normally have that move down. And you can do the same. Just dedicate 20 to 30 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week learning one of these moves, and by the end of the week you'll know how to do it. So for me, I just learnt these moves at school. I think I had chemistry lessons 4 or 5 days a week, and conveniently they lasted about 30 minutes. So during those chemistry lessons, I just practiced spinning the pen around my fingers. Now obviously guys, make sure you do pay attention in class because, you know, education's important. But the moral here is to spend 20 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week to one of these moves, and you'll master it within 7 days. So that's my homework for you, and that concludes this video.